Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Rodriguez. Welcome to my YouTube channel, The Life Science Doc. This will be my first video in a series of lessons on science. This one in particular is going to cover the nature of science. We'll be going through a few different things, talking about theories and laws, and how we gather evidence and the different branches of science. So let's begin. So I have put together a PowerPoint to follow along with the lesson. It pretty much highlights the main points of each topic, and I won't necessarily be reading word for word. They're more of a visual aid for anyone that prefers to be able to see what I'm discussing. So as you can see, the title of this lesson is The Nature of Science. So let's begin with the obvious question that anyone interested in science would ask. What exactly is science? So the textbook definition of science is the systematic study of the natural world. However, I like to say that science primarily is the tool we use to learn about the world around us. It is a process that we humans developed to study everything from the deepest parts of the ocean to the far reaches of outer space. Science is what has managed to bring all the technological advances you see in our world today, and it's something all of us can take part in and enjoy. Science can be divided into three main branches: life sciences, earth sciences, and physical sciences. The three branches each have their own subsections. Life science, for instance, can include subjects such as biology, anatomy and physiology, zoology, and much more. Earth sciences are similar, and many people usually think of geology when they think of studying the Earth, but meteorology, which is the study of weather, also falls under this category. And then finally, we have the physical sciences, which deal with forces that govern our universe. Physicists study the motion of objects that can be as large as planets or as small as atoms, while chemists seek to understand what basic elements make up everything around us. Each of these areas is a world unto itself, so feel free to explore whatever interests you the most. Now, the next question we should concern ourselves with is, what does science tell us? It's a pretty open-ended question, but the best way to answer it would be to say that science gives us two categories of statements. Those would be theories and laws. Theories are widely accepted explanations about how things work. They require a lot of evidence to back them up, and there must be agreement among the scientific community that the explanation is the best that we currently have to explain something. Think of how this is different from how most people use the word theory in everyday speech. Typically, someone will start a sentence with the phrase, "I have a theory that such and such a thing works a certain way." Usually what a person means is that they have a guess. So let's make sure we understand that in science, a theory is most definitely not a guess. The next type of statement would be a law. Now, a law differs from a theory in that it's not explaining how something works. Instead, it's telling you what is happening. That means it's a factual statement. So think of it this way. If you want to be able to tell the difference between a theory and a law, remember that a theory says how something is working and a law says what is happening. Additionally, laws are usually short statements, maybe one or two sentences. Sometimes they're even written as math equations, but theories usually require someone to write an entire essay on. In this slide, I have a couple of examples. On the left, that would be an image of basically the model for plate tectonics, which kind of explains things such as continental drift theory, how parts of the Earth have been moving and sliding and continents have been drifting away from each other. That would be an example of a theory. It takes an entire course to sometimes learn how all of that stuff goes together. On the right, we have an example of Newton's third law of motion, which states that for every action force, there is an equal and opposite reaction force. Like I said, a law can be explained in 1 or 2 sentences, and usually it's describing what happens, and that never changes. Everywhere in the universe, that statement holds true. So now that we know that science gives us theories and laws, we should ask, how do we get these theories and laws to begin with? The answer is by gathering evidence. Scientific explanations rely on what we call empirical evidence. That is evidence that we gather through the use of our 5 senses, which can be measured in some sort of meaningful way. Think of your favorite legal dramas. You always need evidence to win a case. Well, the same is true with science. In order for something to be elevated to the status of a theory, it requires a lot of evidence. If the evidence gathered doesn't hold up to high standards, or if there's evidence against an explanation, then we have to reconsider that explanation and gather more evidence. This process never ends because technically in science, we never really prove anything one way or another. We simply have evidence that supports or rejects an explanation. Now that we know that evidence is so important, we need to consider where can we gather this evidence. Well, usually we gather evidence in 2 types of places, either in the field or in a laboratory. Generally speaking, going outside and collecting samples or observing nature is what we refer to as fieldwork, while lab work is done usually in an indoor setting under very highly controlled conditions. Usually in that type of setting, we can make adjustments to things such as lighting, temperature, even the amount of certain types of gases that are in the air. Basically, you can manipulate and control any factor to help you gather evidence under the right conditions. So once all of your data or evidence has been collected, you have to figure out what to do with it. Now, typically, scientists will arrange it in a way that's easy to interpret, such as in a graph or a chart. Now, these graphs and charts can show trends and relationships between different variables to help us understand what we are researching. Think of a scenario where you're growing a plant. We can measure several different pots of plants, all of the same type, and compare the heights at which they grow to the amount of sunlight or water they receive. When you show that on a chart, you can make a pretty easy conclusion whether or not a little bit of sunlight or a moderate amount of sunlight or a whole lot of sunlight helps a plant grow more. The data or evidence is what helps build a proper explanation. Now, once you've completed all of this, typically scientists will present their findings to other scientists. Their peers will look over all of the data they've collected and the explanations they've come up with for what they found, and some of them will try to replicate the experiments to confirm the findings. This process is known as peer review. So peer review is what helps us to know that something is valid. If you're able to reach the same conclusion as someone else that did the same experiment, the likelihood that your conclusion is accurate definitely increases. So let's go over the key points of what we discussed in this lesson. Science is a tool by which we learn about the natural world. We've got 3 branches that you can study: physical sciences, life sciences, and earth sciences. Theories are widely accepted explanations about how things work, and they're based on a large volume of evidence. And we contrast that with laws, which basically describe what is happening in a situation. Remember that theories usually are written in long form essay type, and laws can be described in 1 or 2 sentences, and sometimes even as a math equation. Evidence can be gathered both in the field and in a lab, and realize that we can never prove anything in science. Basically, we use it as a tool to gather evidence to support one type of explanation or to help us reject an explanation. So that's it for this lesson. I hope you found the information useful. If you did, please like and subscribe. I hope to release a video each week on a different topic.
So until next time, have a good one.